So hello, and you're very welcome to this seasonal recording of an interview with Ewan Aitken, who is the CEO of Cyrenians. We're doing this interview for two reasons. We want to hear how Cyrenians are getting on, and we're also encouraging our members to dig deep for their appeal, and the link to their appeal will be in our chat box. So Ewan, you're welcome, and thanks for coming along today.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks very much for the invite.
So you won the Social Impact Award at the recent Causeway Awards. What did that mean to you and to the organisation?
It was great to be recognised by an organisation who we hadn't had that direct relationship with previously, in the sense that you guys chose us rather than we put ourselves forward. And the affirmation for staff from what's essentially a business organisation was also very powerful, and really people really appreciated it.
Great, and you were a deserving winner among pretty stiff competition.
It was, yeah.
And listen, COVID-19, well, this whole year, 2020, has been a tough year for loads of people, but I'd imagine particularly so for the homeless, and you work a lot with the homeless. Can you tell us a bit about how this year has been for you and the people that you work with?
Well, we had to completely reconfigure what we did. So we had to take a whole bunch of our stuff online, but also change the way we supported the folk we have in our communities. So it was all had to be as safe as possible, and the people who are rough sleeping. And we worked with other charities to get folk into hotels. So eventually, it was about 700 people were in hotels one way and another over the first 6 months of lockdown. But we also shifted our food parcels, food redistribution system. So we redistribute surplus supermarket food, and we've delivered now the food for 3 million meals in 8 months. We reconfigured our kitchens from a training kitchen to production kitchen, producing over 1,000 meals a day. We got some furloughed chefs in to help us, which was great. But we also put an employability program online, and we've got about 50 people into jobs. That was a huge thing, but it's been really good to do that. We supported about 80 young people who were struggling at school, and got all of them bar one at the moment into either college, job, or into further education and training. And we've supported about 90 families who are struggling with conflict. We even did stuff with older people, socially isolated, and did a whole number of things. We had an online Kaylee for them, and we were actually sending them postcards because they loved written letters and cards, which was great. But we had to just think completely differently to make sure that we were providing the support for everybody that we did. And we stuck with it, and we managed to keep every single one of our services going right through COVID one way or another.
Wow, I'm still reeling at 3 million meals, and I know a lot of your work has been with kind of people who are homeless and young people at risk of homelessness, but I hadn't realised that you were also stretching out to deal with people who are older and isolated, because there's a lot of that going on at the moment as well. So you mentioned the conflict resolution there, Ewan, and you've done quite a bit of work in the last year on conflict resolution, and also collaborating cross-border with areas I know like Ireland. So what's happening there, and what are you up to?
Well, what's interesting, that was one of the kind of things that came out of COVID that we wouldn't have done otherwise, that's been really good. So instead of having an annual conference, we run the Scottish Centre for Conflict Resolution, we have an annual conference. We did a series of online events, and they went international. So we had about 30 or so countries represented one way or other. Ireland was one of them, which was great. I did an event which we had people from Palestine and Zimbabwe and America and Belgium and France and Scotland and England as well. Really able to talk about that whole business about how we manage conflict in our lives in all the various ways that it happens, which was very powerful. And we wouldn't have done that if it hadn't been COVID, but we'll keep doing it. And because it gives you insights that you would otherwise not get by listening to people whose context is very different.
Absolutely. I know I attended one or two of those events myself, and I guess if you can address conflict within families, that could hit the root cause of what triggers homelessness and actually avoid it happening in the first place. So quite a powerful intervention.
Yeah, I mean, conflict in families is the most common reason for young people present as homeless. Mm-hmm. So sorting that will reduce those numbers enormously.
Excellent. And finally, Ewan, I mentioned at the beginning that we'd like to support your appeal this year, and I'm sure Causeway members would like to donate. Could you just tell us a bit about the Next Step appeal?
So it's based on a story of a guy called Ben and his experience with us and him taking the next step. Because what we're saying is that, you know, when you get into a tough reality of homelessness, it's not like some kind of moment and suddenly one day you're there and the other day everything's sorted. It's often a journey out of it, and a journey that takes different directions. I mean, all our journeys take different directions as we go along. So it's about that next step is the sign of hope of change, rather than saying there's a magic formula. And Ben tells that story really, really well. And there's lots of other ways in which we know that that's the case across the people we support, that it's incremental steps out of a tough reality that really make the difference. And we go with people all the way down that journey, wherever it takes us.
Well, let's hope Causeway can play a small role in making that next step happen. So Ewan, thanks very much. It's been a real privilege to work with you and your team a little bit this year. And before we sign off, what are your plans for Christmas Day?
Well, it's a quiet Christmas just with our family because my mother, who we've been going to visit, is in a bubble with my brother, as they say. That's the new language. So we'll see her later on, and we can visit my father-in-law, who's in Orkney, because that's even more difficult to get to. So a quiet Christmas with the family.
Well, we're having a family Christmas, but I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it's not quiet and have good fun. Ewan, thanks very much, and we look forward to keeping in touch next year as well.
Been a real pleasure. Thanks for all your support.